Yo, what's up, everybody? How you guys doing today? Good to see you, fam. Always supporting in the chat. What's up, everybody? Thanks for coming out. My name is Doug, and this is Leaving the Dream. Oh, it's a crazy world out there, and it has been crazy in Hawaii. I know you guys know. I know you guys know. You've been seeing it on social media. You've been seeing it on the news. We're talking about rising violent crime in Hawaii. I want to take a real close look at it and find out why it's happening and what we can do to take the streets back. So I want to say a quick shout out to everybody hanging out in the chat. TK Holani, T-Chun, Nan, Sin City, Kyoki, Kamuela, Snoop and Snip. What's up? Tia Lisa Fernandez, Liz Costa. How you guys doing? Thanks for coming out, man. Kavehi watching from softball practice. Thanks for coming out. Mandy, Mikey's, what's up? Yeah, man, lots of guns. Lots of guns. And then we're going to talk about that today. Hawaii has the lowest overall gun violence in the country. But recently, there does seem to have been a spike in violent crime, especially shootings. Shootings are no stranger to Hawaii. You guys have seen shootings before, but doesn't it seem like it's been a lot? It's difficult because that doesn't necessarily mean there's been a trending rise. It's just been lately. It is concerning, especially if you live there. I get it. I get it. It's a real thing. We had the Hoylo Ridge murder, where that 23-year-old Juan Barron, he confessed allegedly to killing his 73-year-old lover, Gary Ruby. That guy's remains were found in the bathtub encased in cement. You remember that one? Apparently, I don't know how. Apparently, he told police it was after the victim, Gary, told him that he was HIV positive after the two were intimate. But Ruby's family disputes that he had HIV. So who knows what that was about. Juan Barron was arrested in Anaheim, California on March 9th, trying to board a bus to Mexico. He was this close to getting away. He would have been goners. And then his trial set for like 3 weeks from now, June 20th. So 19 days. We had that morning shootout at the Pokai Kuahivi place in Waianae. That's that street that backs up to the hill that separates Miley from Waianae. 47-year-old Christopher Broom arrested for first-degree attempted murder. And for those of you who don't know, first-degree murder is when you kill more than one person in the same incident. So this was the attempted first-degree murder. And 2 counts of second-degree murder, and also for 3 weapons offenses. Then we had that 35-year-old Michael Kalama Armstrong. He's the dude that falsed that Honolulu police officer, gets arrested, gets RPI'd because the prosecutor wanted more investigation, and then murdered that homeless woman, Linda Johnson, right outside the Kapolei police station with a tree trunk that same day. He had been arrested the night before for punching a police officer who responded to a disturbance at a group home where he punched a worker. So dude punched a worker, cop shows up on that call, gets falsed, gets taken in on assault on police officer, gets RPI'd, which was typical up until that happened. And then he gets out and murders that chick with a tree trunk. He was released the next day. The prosecutor's office declined to take the case. When he got out, he killed that woman. It was only 7 p.m. and he killed that girl. He had 18 prior arrests for crimes including weapons possession and burglary. Long history of mental illness and crimes related to mental illness. He had been in and out of the state hospital, community treatment for the last, 15 years, since 2007. Where are all my stop targeting the homeless folks at? Police aren't targeting the homeless. You know who's targeting the homeless? This guy, Michael Armstrong. You know who targets the homeless? Criminals target the homeless. They make easy victims. They don't like prosecute. And then we had 4 violent robberies on Easter weekend. 4 violent robberies on Easter weekend. We had that Haleiwa Beach Park robbery. A woman hit a man in the leg with a machete, took his bag. Then had the Newtown Park in Aiea. The 53-year-old man was carjacked with a handgun. Then had the one in Waikiki at Paukalani and Kuhio. A dude was robbed with a handgun. His bag and his phone were taken. And then in town by Kemoku, by Sheridan Park, by the Walmart on Makaloa and Sheridan, 2 New York tourists robbed at gunpoint by masked suspects out on the sidewalk. Now, I can think of 3 game rooms near that corner. Have all those bars right there, too, on Kapiolani. Then had 19-year-old Justice Manumalo Kayo. He shot and killed that 20-year-old man near Louis Vuitton and Waikiki. Then had that 19-year-old Nainoa Damon. He drove up to a group of teens at that first scenic lookout on the way up to Round Top, points a gun at an 18-year-old kid, demands his chain necklace. Well, this dude's homie had a gun as well, another 18-year-old, pulls it out to protect his friend who was getting robbed, and that's when Damon shot that kid in the stomach. He died. And then finally, last but not least, recently it was that youth challenge graduation by Thomas Square. It was at Victoria and King. That was Thursday night, I believe. 21-year-old Kalijah Melvin Maleko was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder second after the shooting, and then he was RPI'd. And then another 18-year-old male, Tony Paleafe, was arrested the next day for 1 count of attempted murder first, 3 counts of attempted murder second, and then he was RPI'd. RPI, I'm going to use that term. It means release pending investigation. So it means there's more investigation to be done. He can still be indicted, but he's released pending investigation. And then in that incident, 3 people were shot. 2 of them were teenagers. The 20-year-old and the 17-year-old were in serious condition, and there was a 15-year-old boy in critical condition. Then had 2 suspects, Kapanara Ito and some unnamed juvie. They don't talk about juvie's names. Were arrested for assault 3 and then released on bail for beating up that witness who was chasing the shooter. I wasn't there. Maybe some of you guys that are in the chat tonight, maybe you were there and you saw what happened. But all these incidents have resurrected that age-old debate about gun laws in Hawaii. And unfortunately, I think the people that use this as an opportunity to capitalize on politics, like lobbyists, politicians, and let me be clear, that's all this is right now is politics. They should be ashamed of themselves. And we know they won't be, but they should be. The issue of violent crime in Hawaii is multifaceted. It doesn't come down to drug control or gun control. It doesn't come down to just drugs or homelessness or rising property costs. There's more to it than that. And anyone who tells you that stricter gun laws are the answer, that stricter gun laws will solve this problem, they shouldn't be trusted. They're either blinded by their own political tribalism, which we've been seeing a lot of that lately, or they're extremely ignorant of the problems that Hawaii has. I would take it a step further. I say they're being paid by the larger political lobby. They want to keep it at the forefront of the discussion because it's such a dividing topic. It gets people to push over to that side of the aisle or that side of the aisle. And it keeps us all preoccupied. So we don't know what's really going on. Don't fall into the trap. Do not fall into that trap. If you're going to understand crime in Hawaii, you don't ask the statisticians. You don't ask the bean counters. You don't ask the politicians, the academics that maybe work at the college. The only people who really truly know and understand crime in Hawaii are criminals and police officers, or former criminals. Now, there's a good chance if you live in Hawaii, most of you on this chat live in Hawaii, you have both criminals and police officers in your family or in your close sphere of influence. I'm not, and you know I'm not lying. Ask any of your family or friends who are HPD or criminals running from HPD what's causing crime in Hawaii, and they're going to give you the same answers. They're counterparts. Believe it or not, criminals need cops, cops need criminals. They live in the same world. Yes, sometimes on the same side. But is it a coincidence? Cops and criminals, they know what's going on with crime. But if you ask a politician, go ask the activist, your cousin who's got a big mouth, who likes to be an activist. Go ask the academic, and they're all going to tell you something different. And it's clear to me why. You're so caught up in your campaign or whatever your political objective is. You care more about that than your community. Don't make this about business. That's a clear case of being out of touch. You're going to listen to Ige? He's out of touch. You got to talk to people, boots on the ground. Criminals know why they're doing what they're doing. So today I'm going to give you my perspective. From my experience on the street, I'm going to break down for you the real reasons, in my opinion, why Hawaii is losing the battle against crime right now. All right, so first we got to talk about Hawaii crime. I'm only talking about Hawaii here. I may reference some national statistics just to show you where the trends are. But we're going to start by talking about Hawaii crime. Then we're going to get into who the crime affects and who can make an impact on crime, who can make a difference. Then we're going to talk about what's causing it. We're going to talk finally about how we take back the streets. There's 4 parts to this. All right, so first we're going to talk about crime. Simple crime. Talking about the illegal acts for which people can be punished by the government. That's what crime is. What crimes does Hawaii suffer from? Go ahead and drop them in the chat if you got something to say. What crime does Hawaii suffer from? I'll tell you this. It's mostly property crime. Everybody in this chat has had something stolen from them. If you live in Hawaii or ever lived in Hawaii. And that's not normal. Well, I know people who've never had anything stolen from them on the mainland. But in Hawaii, especially Oahu, on Oahu, everybody's got something stolen from them. Most of the property crimes, we're talking burglary, theft, and criminal property damage, like arsons and spray painting and somebody keying your car, breaking in your house, breaking in your car. The property crime rate is 24.1 incidents per 1,000. So for every 1,000 residents, there's 24 property crimes. That's 2.4% essentially, if you spread it out evenly. Theft is the leading property crime in Hawaii at 71% of all property crime incidents. And now for my Patrons in the house, you could go to the Patreon feed and check that out. You'll see charts about the property crime here. Burglary is only 14% of all property crime in Hawaii, but that's a huge percentage. That's 2% of the, it's 2% lower than the national average of percentage of property crime, which just means typically there's a larger chunk of property crime. A larger chunk of the property crimes are burglary. It doesn't mean they have more burglary, just a larger chunk of property crimes as a whole. Auto theft is higher than the national average at 16% of all property crimes. So there's more auto theft than there is burglary. And then theft is 71%. Raise your hand in the chat if you had a bicycle stolen from you, or your kids have a bicycle stolen from you. It's ridiculous. And let's be honest, it's fair to mention the pandemic made things worse. The whole COVID stuff in Hawaii made things worse. Man, how crazy is that? But property crimes, these are non-violent crimes. And that's kind of weird when you think about a home invasion. I want you guys to think about how a burglary is considered a property crime. But the risk that you take breaking into somebody's house, that they may be home, sleeping in a bedroom. You know how many times I got called a burg where the dude broke in and the person was home and woke up and saw the dude and he freaked out and dug out? Like the risk of breaking in a home. If you ask me, that's a violent crime. I think burglary should have its own classification. It shouldn't be just in property crime, especially if somebody's home. Just the risk that they could be home, though, is dangerous. For you to break in somebody's house, you've come to terms with the fact that you might run into somebody, which means you're prepared. Probably got a weapon, knife, gun, whatever. Everybody carries knives in Hawaii, especially everybody that's burgling your house. That's nothing new. We all know that. Overall, the number of burglaries, larcenies, and arson reported to HPD has actually fallen during the first 4 months this year compared to the same period last year. So even though the majority of our crimes are property crimes, this year, property crimes have dropped, the overall number, but violent crimes have gone up. And it's a sharp peak. In burglary, you typically run like 1,000. In 2017, there was 1,000. In 2018, there was 1,076. Then there was 1,300 in 2019. In 2020, it dropped to 864. That's because everybody was home. Because 2020, everybody's home for COVID, so had less people breaking in the houses by almost half, by more than half. In 2022, it was only 967. There was 1,500 cars stolen the first 4 months of this year. That's crazy. 1,500? That's crazy to think about. Picture 1,500 cars. That's just the first 4 months of 2022. There was 1,294 last year, 1,055 the year before that, 964 in 2019, 581 in 2017. That's crazy. That's actually going up a lot. That is actually going up a lot. This went up from 2021. But like I said, overall property crime went down. We also got a lot of CPD incidents, mostly recently. Like in October, that arsonist set fire to the city-owned surfboard storage rack outside the substation in Waikiki. And that wasn't the first time. It had happened before. That was hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage. I mean, everything went up in flames. In February 2020, the same spot. That's the second time in 2 years. The Chinatown sub, if you guys ever been to the Chinatown sub on the Cocoa Head, Mackay corner of Mauna Kea and Hotel Street, That was recently vandalized. The window to the front door was shattered, and they had to patch it with red tape. So violent crime has gone down overall. Property crime has gone down overall, but violent crime, the rate right now is 2.5 incidents per 1,000 people. And the property crimes, we were talking 24.1 per 1,000. Violent crime, 2.5 per 1,000. So it's a tenth of the property crimes. Almost half the national average, guys. Our violent crime in Hawaii is half the national average so far. And violent crimes are robberies, assaults, rape, murder. That's what they call violent. Kidnapping is a violent crime. But that's why all those are Class A felonies or above. Homicides have been historically low in Hawaii, though, until 2022. Typically, we have 1, maybe 2 murders per month in Hawaii. So that means 4 to 8 murders by the end of April. But right now, that's over double that. More than a 100% increase in 2022. We've seen more than 4 per month. If you go back 4 years, in 2019, there were 3 murders by May 1st. 2020 was 8 murders. 2021 was 6 murders. 2022 was 13 murders by May 1st. And then for robbery, 2019 had 306. 2020 was 221, which makes sense because you got less victims walking around to get robbed. Everyone's in their house. 2021 had 284. 2022, 325. More than a third of those robberies were in Chinatown or downtown. So what's that like? Maybe a 1 mile area, 1 square mile. A third of the robberies. Over 100 in 4 months. That's 25 robberies a month. That's almost 1 a day. Just in Chinatown and downtown. All right, so assaults. They were 382 in 2019. It went up to 347 by 2021. We hit 410 this year. First 4 months. Over 100 assaults a month. And then the HPD data shows that 90 sexual assaults were reported through the end of last month. That's 90 by May 1st, compared to 64 the same time last year. That's still a slight decline from the 93 reported in 2019. So we're technically down from 2019, but 2019 was a wild year. And then HPD also provided the Honolulu City Council recently, because they were going through it's a basic reporting concept. They showed that there was more than a 42% increase in crimes involving guns, knives, or other weapons compared to last year. 42% increase. So far this year, at least 1 homicide has been reported in all of HPD's 8 police districts. That's the first time that's happened in 5 years. D8, which is Waianae, Kapolei, Makaha, had 4. Had 1 a month in Waianae, Makaha, and Kapolei. So that's the crime that Hawaii's dealing with. You guarantee everyone here has either gotten burgled, theft, or had their car broken into for the change in the council or for that bag in the back seat. It's crazy how nuts it is. And its town is the highest crime rate. All right, so now let's talk about who the crime affects. When we talk about crime, you got to acknowledge the 4 groups of people that either are affected by crime or affect crime. You have the criminal, you got the victim, the person it's happening to, you have the police officer who's trying to prevent it and bring justice, and you have the community at large. That's the biggest part of this equation that I think that if we could just grasp onto, and we're going to get into that. Here's what Hawaii's working with right now. If you think of those four things as ingredients to the crime situation in Hawaii, you have the criminal, the victim, the cop, the community. If those are the four ingredients, we're in trouble because the criminal in Hawaii is strong. The criminal in Hawaii is smart, unafraid right now, bold. You guys have all seen it. This is caused by being active. You know, they say, like, if you want to become an expert in something, you got to do 10,000 hours or whatever, 10,000 times. That's why Hawaii criminals are smart, because they get tons of reps in. They're active. They're gaining experience every time they do it. They're gaining experience at the legal system. They're gaining experience with, like, understanding the laws that they're dealing with. They're gaining experience with response time to police officers, what cops can and cannot do. So you have a strong criminal. And the criminals in Hawaii are all races, all ages, young. HPD has arrested 10-year-old Micronesian girls who steal liquor and get drunk at Dole Playground. They've arrested 80-year-old men who molested their grandchildren. 40-year-old Howley fugitives on the run from police departments in Vegas or the mainland. Soldiers, 18-year-old soldiers, moms, dads, coaches, police officers getting arrested. You have a strong and smart criminal in Hawaii with tons of experience. They know their laws as well as cops sometimes. Then you have the victim, the second ingredient. And Hawaii's population is full of easy targets, unsuspecting victims. Our kapuna. Think about your grandma. She doesn't think enough to, like, look around, head on a swivel, catch someone's vibe. Oh, I don't like that guy. I should walk this way. They can barely see. They shuffle when they walk. They can't move quick. They always keep their purse on their body. When the dude yanks it, they fall down, break a hip. Like, they're just easy targets. That's a combination of having a huge tourist population. Hawaii is the premier tourist population, the premier tourist destination of the U.S. The mold was made after Hawaii. It's the ultimate. If anyone could go anywhere in the U.S. and you put a list in the top 10, and Hawaii was one of them, where would you like to go? Everybody's going to say Hawaii. Everybody goes to Hawaii. And tourists are there to have fun. They're typically not there to commit crime because that takes too much energy. They're there to have fun. They leave valuables in their car. They leave their bags on the beach when they go to swim, because that's normal in the rest of the contiguous United States. It's normal to just leave your bag, go jump in the water. It's normal to leave your stuff that you bought at the mall in the back seat of the car. You don't got to worry about people breaking in. They carry loads of cash, tons of credit cards. They walk drunk through Waikiki by themselves late at night. There's a huge military population. And think about what military is. They're young, inexperienced at life, unfamiliar with the place they live in. They did not choose to go there. Most people that go to Hawaii did not choose Hawaii. Sure, it's like, yeah, I'm going to Hawaii at first. But when they get there, they're like, I didn't choose to come here. Like, it's so far away. Everything's so different. It's like going to a different country when you go to Hawaii. I try to explain to people from the mainland. When you go to Hawaii, it's like going to a different country. Everything's different. Not in Waikiki, but everywhere else is different. It's not the same. Different vibe. The language is different. The foods are different. The culture is different. I still have a hard time wrapping my brain around people wearing shoes in the house. Like my family, we don't wear shoes in anyone's house. Our house, anybody. Even if they say leave your shoes on. We go places, people are like, leave your shoes on. My kids are like, sorry, it feels weird. They take their shoes off. But then you're walking through everybody else's like mud, right? Like you're in people's house with dirt on their feet in the people's house. That's normal. Everything's different. It's so different in Hawaii. It's like being on a different planet. And then the people are different. It's a different vibe. It's like so different. People are way more connected in Hawaii. Way more people live in the same house. People drive less. And when they do drive, they drive longer. Like everything's different. And the soldiers, when they get there, they don't know what to expect. They have no idea that there's a lurking criminal following them from the airport, ready to go. Scoping out their car all in one beach park while they're hanging out, having fun. Then we have the heaviest Asian population in the US per capita. And most early Asian immigrants to the US, they settled in Hawaii, which makes sense. I mean, it's the closest to the climate. It's actually geographically closer too. Hawaii's made up of 57% Asian peoples. Wow, that's crazy. 781,000 Asian Americans live in Hawaii. And for whatever reason, like Japanese populations in Hawaii, it's a popular target. I remember, especially like elderly Japanese, they were a big time target for financial crimes. Elderly people in Chinatown, that's a big target. They're super easy targets. And then they're like generally quiet, honorable, small in stature. Think about when you're 80. And then the thing about Hawaii is there's tons of wealth in very close proximity to poverty. So you have like housing. Think about the housing in Ahuimanu. You got a housing on Ahuimanu Road. And just across the street is a $10 million property. 5 acres. Where I used to live. I rented a house on the 5 acres with 4 other houses. Across from the housing, right? So when I came home one day and saw a Korenic chick riding her bike wearing my wife's clothes that she stole out of our dryer, it's because had the Korenic chick at the housing walk across the street to the place that we kept really nice, and stole our stuff out of the dryer. Whole outfit. Stole my daughter's dress. She had a princess dress. Kid's name was Troy Solace. He stole my mail. Freaking guy. Oh, Song Woo Hong. Thank you for the gift. Thanks for the super chat. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming out. Man, you're awesome. Mahalo for that. Always coming through. So having that wealth in close proximity to the poverty is huge. Well, first of all, it's an island. But second of all, there wasn't great civil engineering in Hawaii. The roads just follow the valleys and the mountains. And so housings were placed in certain places where they could build at the time. And that creates an environment that makes it easy for not only people in poverty to see people who have nice things and maybe don't appreciate it, but also people who don't have much that want more. It's easier to take. Now, we'll talk later, and I'll show that South America has proven that poverty and violent crime are not necessarily directly correlated. There's plenty of evidence that there are countries that are getting more money, that are becoming wealthier countries, but their violent crime is going up. So it's not necessarily directly correlated, poverty with violent crime. So that's really convenient for criminals. And then you have the police officer, the third ingredient. The police officer in Hawaii is weak. They're 300 officers short. Hundreds retiring every year. I think it's like 100 retire every year. When I worked there was 100 retiring and 100 hired every year. That's been getting lower and lower and lower. And the recruit classes are notoriously light. It wasn't common to have like a super light class when I went through. Ours was 32 when we started, 26 graduated. That was a light class. I remember talking to people who were like, yo, we had 63 in our class. And they dropped 20 or whatever. Ours, we had 32, we dropped 6. But then classes started coming through with like starting 16, graduating 8. I remember classes that graduated single numbers, if I'm not mistaken, 9, I think. Something super low. I remember because the push was coming and guys were on the motor list trying to make motormen and only got pushed up 9 or whatever. So notoriously light classes. So HPD is weak. And as many arrests as they do make, as much crime as they do fight or prevent, it's highly likely that that suspect, like in the cases we talked about earlier, is going to get released pending investigation, RPI. Or worse, ROR'd, released on own recognizance. Or they're not RPI, but they make bail. Some of them actually go to jail, a really small population. But there's as many arrests as they make, there's a way better chance they're getting RPI'd than they are doing jail time. If they do go to jail, it's most likely the case is going to get dropped, or maybe they're going to plead to a lesser charge. That's typical. We all know that. Or maybe they'll get on hope probation. One of those things is going to happen before they're going to serve an appropriate sentence. The police can arrest all they want. I mean, what is a police officer to do if there's really no consequences? You hear him say it. Arrest me all you want. I'll be out tomorrow. There's no real consequences. And then the officers feel like they wasted their time. And that gets old. And then the city's wasting their money. After a while, the cops are going to get jaded. They're going to stop being proactive. I bet you we're seeing it already. Think about it. These guys just respond to the radio. They're going to want to go to specialized units. They're not going to want to be on the road. They're going to retire as soon as they're available. And we keep going like that. And that proactive, difference-making police officer, he dies. He dies inside. The guy who likes to hunt, to do work, and instead that soft 9-to-5 cop inside of him, that guy takes over. The good, proactive police officer inside of him starts to die. And then that guy that starts thinking, I'm motivated by my pension now. or the cushy schedule because I coach volleyball, coach football, coach softball, right? Makes it real easy for that guy to take over when you start getting jaded because the guys you're arresting, they're just getting out. And then the fourth ingredient is the community at large. You guys. To me, that's the most important ingredient. And in Hawaii, I think they got the best chance. The population is diverse. Some would say the most diverse. That's why we love Hawaii. It's a mixing bowl for sure. It's my favorite place on earth. Love the cultures, the languages, the food. And then Hawaii's culture is deeply honor-based, family-oriented, and for the most part, community-driven, especially when you get into the neighborhoods. I'll never forget, I was so happy when some kids rolled up to my house in Kuli'o'o the day we moved in. Some kids from down the street rolled up on their bikes and wanted to play with my kids. My kids finally had a neighborhood to play in with neighborhood kids. You get into the neighborhoods, you got that. People in Hawaii are protective. People in Hawaii are loyal. Because of that, though, I do notice there is a lot of, I didn't see nothing. I don't want to get involved. So we do run into that. That is like a downside for crime prevention. And then some of the older folks, like I remember I did a case, I've said this on my Patreon before, but I did a case for this, I don't know, he had been an 85-year-old Japanese man, and he had been a victim of identity theft, and some dude took like $50,000 over a few month period. He was so shamed. He was the victim, but he was so shamed. He didn't want to make a statement. His daughter told me, I have to be the one that makes the statement. I have power of attorney, and he's not, he's too ashamed. He feels disgraced. And so I want to be the one to press charges. She knew he wouldn't. He didn't want to talk to me. He just kept his head down. In communities like Papakolea, which when I first started on the beat, my first week, I was up in Papakolea. Some families rarely call police up there. They're obliged to handle the situation themselves. That was new when I went up there. Anybody knows who lives Papakolea, you know what I mean. When I was new to D1, District 1, which is town, I was put on second watch, day watch, and my motorman told me, first time I was up there, Papakolea takes care of itself. But if they call, drive fast, because it's got to be bad. We had a couple big melees, like one up at the cemetery. There's a cemetery there, had a bunch of dudes fighting. A couple weapons calls, but for the most part, even if you burg their house, they'll take care of it. I remember going to a burglary, and the victim of the burglary was like, I just wanted to document for my insurance company, but we'll find out who did it. We'll take care of them. That's Papakolea. So you take Hawaii's mix of experienced criminals, easy targets, the police, which are like sheepdogs with no teeth right now, and a community who keeps to themselves. That's the perfect environment to see spikes of crime like this. Of course, there's more to it than all this, but these are the basics of it. And now we're going to get into what is driving the crime in Hawaii. And what's changed. First, we're going to talk about what the media and politicians are blaming Hawaii's crime on. We've all heard it. Number one on the list is guns right now. That's a big popular one, is guns. And this is the overwhelming scapegoat that you're going to hear about the shootings, because they all have a gun involved. So it's an easy line to draw. People are still calling for the banning of handguns, or at least pistols. And most rifle platforms, which in Hawaii, the AR-15 is the most popular. And it's the most scary looking because it looks like a automatic, it looks like a machine gun, right? But I can assure you that the data that's being presented as to the reasons that the restrictive gun laws of Hawaii coincide with the fact that it's got the lowest violent crime rate in the nation, those are being manipulated. Mostly inaccurate as to the reasons why. Yes, Hawaii has some of the most restrictive gun laws. And yes, it has some of the lowest overall violent crime in the country. But it's a cop-out to connect those two and make those correlated. Gun laws are typically a reflection of the communities that they were passed in. So yes, it's going to mirror the appropriate amount of gun crime for that neighborhood. And by neighborhood, I mean the state of Hawaii, by peoples, because it's state law. A non-violent community who's never really used or needed guns, they're going to pass more restrictive gun laws. But they're also going to have lower violent crime rates. It's the same type of person. It's like the type of person that wants restrictive gun laws, also the type of person that doesn't get in too much trouble, doesn't think they need a gun. You tell somebody in Chicago, right? It's illegal to carry a gun in Chicago. You find somebody who carries a gun and try to tell them why they don't need to carry a gun with all the murders going on. It's a different community. And Hawaii's different. It's not causation. It may be correlated, but it's not a cause. Because the gun law isn't the only reason for the low violent crime. It's my opinion that the community is the reason for the low gun crime. Because we got tons of guns in Hawaii. But the gun laws get the credit. We should be giving credit to the hardworking community members that watch over their kids, raise up their sons to be good community leaders, community-centered men, community-centered little girls. Like, the parents are doing what they're supposed to be doing in these communities. That's why Hawaii is so awesome. The people of Hawaii are so awesome. It's the moms and dads of Hawaii who make a difference. But the gun laws take all the credit. They want them to take the credit because they're going to slide these laws into a 2,000-page packet of laws that they're going to sign off without reading and looking into them. Signed by the crooked politicians and the lobbyists that are paying these guys bills. It is hard to get a gun in Hawaii, though, compared to other places. You had the federal gun control laws like the Gun Control Act in 1968. You had the Brady Handgun Violence Protection Act in 1993. Those made it pretty hard to get a gun. And these laws have been in place for decades in Hawaii. And the evidence is clear. The people who follow gun laws are law-abiding citizens. The people who break those gun laws are criminals. They're the ones you don't want to have the guns anyway. Criminals, by definition, aren't going to obey the law. I looked at a study. It says about 10% of prison inmates in Hawaii who got arrested for gun crimes say they obtained their guns legally. So 10% of prison inmates who committed crimes with guns said they got them legally. That means 90% of the criminals who used guns to commit crimes got their guns illegally in a state with the most restrictive gun laws. And I'm highlighting this so you know it's not the gun laws that are the problem. So increasing the gun laws in Hawaii is not going to fix things. There is a background check in Hawaii, and there used to be a waiting period. There's not a waiting period anymore. But the background checks don't even really do much. They do things for like the career criminal or the dude that's been admitted to a state mental health hospital. But if someone with no criminal history walks into a gun store to buy a gun to commit a crime, a background check doesn't stop them. A drug addict walks into a gun store and tries to buy a firearm so they can commit a crime. All they got to do is lie about their addiction. The background check's not going to do anything for them. And somebody walks in with serious mental health issues, but no history of treatment or institutionalization, which, by the way, is a huge problem in Hawaii, and we're going to talk about that. The institutionalization rate in Hawaii is very low. The treatment rate for mental health issues in Hawaii is very low. So somebody walks in to buy a gun that's never had a history of treatment or institutionalization, background check doesn't stop them. There was a study in 2018 that showed from 1981 to 2000, background checks had no effect on homicide rates in California. So we just can't give all the credit to the gun laws in Hawaii. Yes, I benefited as a police officer by having those gun laws so strict. Because if I saw a pistol or a gun while you were driving at a traffic stop, or I stop you and you got a gun, you are committing a felony, and I could draw my weapon because it was a dangerous situation. Cops here in Detroit, I carry a gun. And when a cop pulls me over, I have my hands on the steering wheel. I tell him, officer, I just want you to know I do have a license to carry a pistol, and my pistol's in my waist. Now this dude knows I have a gun, and he's still got to do this traffic stop going back and forth from his car to mine. It's definitely easier for that gun just to be illegal. Then you know, okay, you're coming out, you're going to jail. So guns trained on you. I got the jump already. But when you got to work around people who have guns and it's legal, it's way more difficult. So yes, I benefited from it. And that's why I'm telling you, it doesn't do anything. I would rather Hawaii have a carry law, personally myself. Easy for me to say, I don't live there anymore. But if those gun laws worked, how come the Chicago River runs red with the blood of young black men every single year, worse than any other place? Chicago's got incredibly strict gun laws. So does New York, for that matter. Most semi-automatic firearms are illegal in Chicago. Yet it's the most murderous city in the country by a long shot. Detroit used to be up there, but we're way down the list right now, apparently. Chicago has a 50% surge in its murder rate in 2020. 50%. In 2020, they recorded the highest number of gun-related homicides on record. And like it or not, the stat is what it is, guys. I didn't make it up. Americans own more firearms than ever before. and carry more concealed weapons than they could decades ago. And even though it doesn't look like it when you watch the news, crime rates have fallen every single year. Le Ilima, thank you, Le. Mahalos. Thanks for coming out. I'm glad you made it. Say what's up to Mana. I appreciate you, Le. Thank you for coming out. Le, one of my prize patrons. Been there since day one. I appreciate you, Le. You're awesome. Thank you. What a blessing. So even though more Americans have guns than ever before, more people carry guns on the street than ever before, crime rates have fallen significantly. In 2019, the violent crime rate fell to the second lowest total rate since 1971. It's 50 years. The murder rate was less than half of what it was in the 1980 peak. Some of you guys were around for that. Some of you guys were snorting coke in 1980. You know what I'm talking about. That was the coke wars. The two lowest violent crime rates of the last 48 years were 2014 and 2019. Crime is dropping. 52% down from 1991. And we have 215 million new firearms since then. Double the number of privately owned firearms back then. And then a 1986 survey found that 40% of felons admitted that they decided not to commit at least one crime in their life because they were afraid that their potential victim was carrying a gun. 34% of criminals had been scared off, shot at, wounded, or captured by an armed victim. 34% of criminals. The bottom line, that when gun ownership is up, violent crime is down. Think about it. If you're going to break into somebody's house and you know they don't have a gun, no problem. Easy peasy. All right, guys, let's talk about ghost guns, though. This is a real potential issue. I will say that. For Hawaii, it's a real potential issue. It's not so much a potential issue for states like Michigan where people carry firearms. Like the playing field is level, guys. But in Hawaii, this could be a problem. If you don't know what a ghost gun is, it's basically an unserialized, untraceable firearm. You can buy them online. You get them like without a background check. It's basically an unfinished frame of a gun or a receiver. You know, the piece of the firearm that has the firing pin in it. And the concept is that you're essentially building it yourself. And a lot of people can 3D print receivers. The only problem, guys, is that most crimes are not committed with ghost guns. The data's not there yet. They exist. And yes, we're pulling ghost guns off the street every single day. But most of the crimes are not being committed with ghost guns. It's like a red herring. It's a misnomer. Yes, ghost guns exist, but it's not what most crimes are being committed with. Stolen guns. More than 40 guns have been reported stolen this year in Hawaii. 10 a month. And historically, over the last 5 years, you're talking 180 a year, which is almost 20 a month. So we're at about 10 a month right now. And this is a problem. Stolen guns is a problem. Most criminals, in my experience, who have guns, break into homes, break into cars, and have guns. Most criminals that will break into your house will also steal your gun. It's rare you'll find a burglar who breaks in the house and he's looking for money and jewelry, but then sees a gun and leaves it. If they're willing to break in your house and steal your stuff, they're also willing to steal a gun. And it happens all the time. And they'll just take the safe too. If you have that little gun safe, that little tiny one, they'll just take that. Usually they got plenty of time. You're at work, especially if you live up on a mountain somewhere, like up around top. That they will take your gun from your house. And the type of person that takes to break in your house and steal a gun, that's the same type of person that will use that gun to commit another crime, like a carjacking or a robbery. And obviously, gun laws can't really affect the theft of guns. There's really no impact, no measurable impact that we have. Especially if they're going to steal a gun safe, you know what I mean? I said all that because I want you guys to know that Hawaii crime is not low because of its gun laws. That's nonsense. Hawaii crime is low because it's 2,500 miles away from a shore, from the mainland. It's hard to get to. It's super expensive. Tourists and soldiers typically don't go on vacation or get deployed so they can rob people. They'll get DUIs and fights in Waikiki, but they don't really come to Hawaii to commit crime. People will drive to Michigan to commit crimes and then go back to Ohio, or drive from Detroit to Indiana, commit crimes, go back to Detroit. You can't just drive to Hawaii. The fact that it's so isolated is huge. It's huge for Hawaii. People can't just get there easy. It still happens. A lot of people are fugitives in Hawaii, but they didn't go to Hawaii to commit crime typically. They committed a crime where they were at and they hide in Hawaii. That's why Hawaii crime's so low. So the first thing the media tells us is it's guns, and that's ridiculous. Second thing on the list, and I've heard a journalist recently say that HPD needed to do more community outreach. Wrong answer. Here's why. There are not enough police officers right now to do police work, prevent crime, deliver justice, and reach out to the community. And then on top of that, why are we paying professional crime fighters to do the job, to play the role of the community activist or the politician or the charity? I agree we should have community policing units, and we have one in every district. Check. HPD's got one in every single district, community policing. It's called CPT. These officers are not on the road. They're not on patrol. They're dedicated to that community. They have little spots where they hang out. Like there used to be one, Mayor Wrights, if I'm not mistaken. No. Was it Mayor Wrights? No. Over at Queen Emma, I think. Yeah, I think over at, if I'm not mistaken. Well, Anna Apartments, I think, has a CPT office. They're not on the road, but that's what they do. They're in CPT, community policing. And I get that. I'm down with that. We'll talk about what I think community policing should be. I think community policing is a term a lot of people use, don't really understand what it means. But not every officer should be with community outreach. First watch officers in Chinatown need to focus on capturing violent career criminals who are terrorizing the community. I don't need them protecting my feelings. I don't need them to make me feel better about myself. I'd rather not see them, to be honest with you. I just want to be happy knowing that they work in the shadows, in the alleys, at night, putting their lives on the line to catch bad guys. I need them to do what they do best. Go get them before they break into my house or hurt my kids. Let the charities, let the churches, let the social services take care of community outreach. The only reason that the police department should reach out to the communities is to create a relationship so you can start to cultivate a desire for the kids when they're young to become police officers, to invest in the future of the department, to raise up good, solid kids with a great moral compass, who are strong-willed, who are brave, and want to serve their communities. That's a good reason for community outreach. I'm totally on board for that. It's a PR tool for hiring. So we get the real community in the police department, so that the police department and the community are the same thing. That's why I like having local cops, because they know the communities. That's a long-term solution. People say community policing, but that's an easy word to say. But not many people know what it means. There's another term for it: focused deterrence. Focused deterrence policing. And we'll talk about that later. So number 3 on the list that they're telling us is the discrimination. And unfortunately for you, if you're in that camp, in Hawaii, we have 0 evidence for that assumption. In Hawaii, there's no race that runs the department. There's no race that overwhelmingly dominates the ranks. HPD have black, white, Japanese, Thai, Viet, Chinese, Portuguese, Hawaiian, European, African. I know a dude from South America. We got Micronesian officers. From my experience, if you're being arrested or cited, it's because you did something wrong, not what you look like. That might be a real thing in the mainland, but overwhelmingly, Hawaii is much, much, much better at it, because there's so much diversity in the department. Those are the things that the mainstream media wants you to think are the problems in Hawaii, because they're easy taglines. Now I'm going to tell you what I think are the real reasons for crime in Hawaii. Number 1, and this is one that we can't really do anything about in the police department, and I guess the community can do something about it long term, but I honestly think the biggest problem is fatherless homes. More than 40,000 children on the island of Oahu live without their dad. It ain't the kid's fault. It's the dad's fault. 35%, over a third of those live in poverty. Half of all the households in Makaha, Waimanalo are fatherless homes. You take that Makaha and Nalo, and I have the charts on my Patreon for the patrons that are watching. Makaha and Waimanalo, 50% of all households are fatherless. And there is a unique importance of fathers to their children and to their homes, to the success of their homes and communities, especially in Hawaii, which is so community-based. Man, the role of the father is so overlooked. And it's so important to the health and well-being of families as a whole, for it to be so overlooked in government, in nonprofit contracts, in programs, in social services. For that part to be overlooked is a shame. We should have like statewide initiatives. I do know a couple good ones that I follow on Instagram. There's like fathers in Hawaii. There's like a couple groups that are doing some really good things there. And we know that the main causes of the fatherless homes are divorce and just having a baby out of wedlock, like you meet somebody, you guys hook up, you have a baby. But that's the same around the rest of the country as well. But there are peripheral causes in Hawaii, like crystal meth, like mental health issues, and homelessness. And those are the next three things that I bring up as my reasons for the rising crime in Hawaii. Number two, but besides the fatherless home, but impacting fatherless homes is meth, batu, ice. Hands down, the greatest driver of crime in Hawaii. Hands down, above everything else, crystal meth. It's an epidemic. Of the hundreds of people that I've seen arrested, I can probably count on my hands how many of them never smoked ice. But I can't even find anybody in Michigan who smoked ice. I'm not kidding you. It's crazy. Ice is the biggest threat. And if anyone tells you ice isn't the reason, they probably just smoked ice before they told you that. The overwhelming majority arrests that I made, of drug arrests that I made, so I'm arresting for drugs, they were not arrested primarily for the drugs. They were arrested initially for something else, and then they had the drugs on them. So I'm literally seeing that it spans every type of crime that I've arrested someone for. I get them back to the station, and they got ice in their pocket. People commit crimes in Hawaii because of crystal meth. Drugs are the reason people steal your bike. Drugs are the reason people steal your bag off the beach. Drugs are the reason they take the jalousies out of your window and break in your home when you're sleeping or you're at work. Drugs are the reason they break in your car. Drugs are the reason people are being shot. Drugs are the reason that our kapuna are being robbed in Chinatown or in Kalihi. And drugs, might I add, are the biggest reason for the mental health crisis in Hawaii. Yes, drug use and mental health are two different things, but they go hand in hand. Good luck smoking ice for 5 years and not leaving that with a mental health crisis in your life. Chronic and prolonged crystal meth use will burn that brain. It's not always true. It doesn't always happen, but most of the time. If you reduce the meth addiction and the meth use in Hawaii, you will lower homelessness, mental illness, fatherlessness. Hawaii ranks dead last in the nation, you guys. Dead last in the entire, all 50 states, Hawaii ranks last for access to care among adults with mental illness. 68% of Hawaii adults with mental illness did not get any mental health treatment. And mental health issues are a major catalyst for homelessness, a major cause for homelessness. Homeless people aren't the reason for the crime rates. It's mentally unwell drug addicts who have been the problem. The mentally unwell drug addicts just happen to be the biggest segment of the homeless population. Yeah, there are homeless people that aren't addicted to crystal meth. They're not easy to find, but they're out there. And if once you're homeless, it's like, how are you going to pull yourself off that cliff? Once you're homeless, good luck getting a job. Good luck getting an education when you're homeless. And not having a job and not having an education, that makes certain you'll never have a place to live. When you're homeless, you're surrounded by other homeless. So many of them are drug addicts. Your chances of staying away from drugs are goose eggs. I cannot tell you how many times some new park or somewhere in D1 and they were not addicted to drugs yet. When they would fly here from the mainland to be homeless so they could shower on the beach and try to make a life, I would tell them, I always had the same script. I told them all the time, I'm like, bro, you got to get a place to stay or go back home. Because you hang out with the homeless people over here long enough, you're going to start smoking ice. Then you're done. Not even once. One time and you're done. I can't smoke ice. Hey, let me tell you guys right now, me, Doug Korenic, if I smoke ice, I'm hooked. I guarantee you. I can never smoke ice. Too risky. Most of you guys are like me. One hit and you're done. It scares me to death. There's something that powerful to destroy the lives I watched it destroy. Sure enough, those kids that I warned, they're smoking ice, turning tricks in the park, selling themselves inside of 6 months. I'll never forget this one boy. He was like 18, 19, maybe 20. Showed up. He wasn't smoking ice. His girlfriend was. She got kicked. She got them kicked out of their house, so they pitched a tent out on Monterey Beach Park. He started smoking ice, and inside of 6 months, I caught him with a John in the bathroom at Monterey Beach Park. He was 19, 20, had a girlfriend. He was turning tricks to make money for ice. She was pregnant. The baby was born with asthma, a bunch of other stuff. Like 6 months after they came to the park, it was so sad. Good luck getting out of that, man. And now you're committing crimes to support your habit. Now you're being arrested. It's just a busy cycle. In and out of jail, in and out of jail. Now good luck getting a job with the record you got. For the most part, police try to avoid the homeless any chance they get. For an officer to arrest the homeless dude, he must have done something. Actually, the biggest excuses or the biggest complaints we had was like, how come you're not arresting that guy, officer? Every day he sits there in front of my building and does that or does this. How come you're not arresting him? You hear that more than you hear, why are you arresting him so much? Every chance they get, officer tries not to arrest the homeless guy. And I'm not suggesting that police should be responsible for the homeless. I don't think they should. I think they should handle crime. End of story. That way it doesn't matter who you are, homeless or a doctor. If you commit the crime, you go to jail. Then the third reason I think crime is rising is because criminals don't fear the police anymore. They just don't. They're not afraid. A recent major study of 2,000 felons in state and federal prisons across the U.S. showed that criminals actually fear armed citizens more than they do the police. And in Hawaii, there's no consequences for your actions anymore. Hawaii law is soft. In Hawaii, criminals know the system. They understand how low their odds are that they'll face any real consequences for their actions. They know that the police don't have enough resources to watch or to catch them 24 hours a day. All you gotta do is adjust the times they're committing their crimes. You commit 10 crimes a day, you might get close to getting caught on 3 of them. You might actually only get caught on 1 of them. Then you go to CRD, you get released. Or you go to court, you get released. So what? You don't show up to court, they issue a warrant. So stay out, get high, smoke ice till you finally get caught. You'll get clean when you get caught. I heard that all the time. I'll get clean when I get caught. The fourth reason is the political climate. The criminal element knows that right now, the climate is not friendly for police officers. All the virtue signaling, all the public opinion. Right now, it's in favor of the poor criminal, the poor marginalized criminal who's just trying to provide for his family during a pandemic, man. Can't you see? And then California said it was okay. They decriminalized shoplifting. You saw how that worked out. They know that the odds are stacked in their favor as a criminal. If the mob be for us, who can be against us? It's because that media hype train is so overwhelming, that their voice is so strong. You see it on every news channel. But now we're having trouble finding people that actually want to wear the badge because they see this stuff. Good people, moral and just, who they just can't risk it. Why would they do that to their families? And that brings me to number 5. Shortage of police officers. We have more than 300 slots to fill in Honolulu. It's because their training and their purpose has been diluted. Police officers trained with a gun should not be handling nuisance complaints, found property cases, records cases. Hire civilians or trainees or cadets to handle that. Not the guy that you train tactically. And the training's inadequate, 100%. Are we going to pretend that in-service training is sufficient? It's a joke. Stop pretending. Cops want more training. Cops don't get mental or physical wellness support, like encouragement to work out or to stay healthy mentally. Counseling, it's just not there. They say it's there, but they make it real hard. And then you add what we talked about earlier, the frustration cops have. They're not convicting the suspects that officers are arresting. And if an officer feels like after a hard day's work where he chased down a criminal that tried to hurt him, he barely survived it, he's all dirty and stinky from rolling around with the guy, a violent criminal, the dude doesn't go to jail, no officer is going to survive that for 30 years. Enough with the revolving door crime. And then Micronesian youth gangs, mostly the Chuukese, in my opinion, from what I ran into. I had almost no problems with Marshallese, which was, there's a big Marshallese community in Makiki. But the Micronesian youth gangs, they're a serious problem in town, and people don't want to talk about it. I don't know why they want to talk. If we can't talk about it, then we can't ever do anything with it. It's not Micronesian people's fault. These kids that you see mayor rights that are crossing into town causing problems, they don't have much direction. They don't have any support. Very little education. I remember there was like an 11-year-old and 12-year-old girl at Dole Park drinking vodka that she stole from the store on Keenan. She would dip her finger in Kool-Aid. She had a packet of Kool-Aid, Country Time or whatever, would suck on her finger and then drink the vodka. Her fingers were all red from the Kool-Aid. And she was with this whole group, maybe 30 kids. And many of them don't understand English well, let alone laws or the law enforcement. A lot of them that young, they don't even know They don't even understand how to avoid crime or why. There's no repercussions for it. They hardly think about their future at that age. You know what I mean? They're just doing what the other kids around them are doing. Education. Number 6. Much more important today than it ever was, especially in Hawaii. We know that the quality and quantity of the education a person receives will determine their success or their way of life. I'm not saying everybody should go to college, but education is important. And I'm not talking about the general population, the prisons too. It helps with recidivism. The disparity between education levels of the inmate population and the general population is insane. Only 18% of the general population have not completed high school. 27% of federal inmates, 40% of state inmates, and 47% of local jail inmates. 31% of probationers failed to complete high school. Education is also believed to reduce crime amongst criminals. And as they stand now, recidivism rates in the U.S. vary between 41 and 71%. Right now, the most effective way to reduce recidivism, people going back to jail and recommitting crimes, is to educate prisoners. It's the strongest piece of data we have. Another reason, number 7, that I think we're having problems in Hawaii, I call them institutionalized prodigals. Sending our prisoners off island to mingle with mainland prisoners is an easy way to bring back institutionalized, hardened criminals. I really think Hawaii's got to figure out a way to keep its prisoners in the islands. I don't know if it's possible. But I got a chart on my Patreon if you want to take a look of the actual correctional facilities we use from Hawaii. That brings us to, I guess, the most notorious of all Hawaii prison gangs, Uso Fam. That was formed in the 90s. You guys have all seen or heard of Uso. It was formed in the 90s when Hawaii started sending its inmates to the mainland prisons. They were doing that because budget and overcrowding. And what started off as just like a small group of Samoans, Uso is the term for brother. So it started off with just this small group of Samoans that now is a huge multi-state prison gang, essentially, that includes any Hawaii inmate. You don't have to be Samoan. You've all seen that. It started with about a dozen members and grown to at least 1,000. I got a couple facts here. They call recruits to USO 21s because U is the 21st letter of the alphabet, with membership contracts written in blood. New members must take an oath and read the rules. They include never turning your back on a USO, never messing around with another USO's woman, and no ratting. That started because Hawaii started sending its prisoners to the mainland in 1995. It was supposed to be short term. They just wanted to get the prisoners off the island because they were overcrowded. But we're 30 years later, and we're still depending on out-of-state prisons. Hawaii signed a contract with CoreCivic, the Corrections Corporation of America, in 98. And that's when they started sending prisoners to the Prairie Correctional Facility in Appleton, Minnesota. They used to send them all the way to Minnesota, right by me. But now they have 8 other prisons through 6 states, including Saguaro. That was opened just for Hawaii in 2007. If you guys know somebody in prison on the mainland from Hawaii. They probably have saguaro. And they've had problems at saguaro, especially with Hawaii inmates. They had there were 3 Hawaiian inmates murdered. If you guys remember that. But those the off-island prisons are housing 1,400 Hawaii prisoners. That's over 25%. That's saguaro. And think about it. You send these dudes off to prison. They have to join a gang to survive. That's what prison is. You don't have a choice. You find a set, and most of the time you can't even pick your set. It's by race usually. So they go to prison on the mainland. They mingle with mainland criminals. They get institutionalized, criminalized. Then they come back. They just spent 7 to 10 years gangbanging. And now they come back. That's the life they lead. And then there are peripheral reasons. Like those are the main reasons that I think that we're struggling. But there's other reasons. Let's not forget COVID really screwed things up right now. That COVID enforcement, first of all, COVID changed crime because everyone was staying home, so you didn't have as many burglaries because people weren't breaking into homes because people were home. But you had more robberies because everybody's out alone. But on the law enforcement side, that COVID enforcement was a heavy burden and never should have happened. Then add to the fact that you got criminals wearing masks now. It used to be weird. You used to be able to get, if I would have saw you wearing a mask in 2017, I'm like, oh, this dude's doing something wrong. I'd have been watching you. What's up? What's up with the dude in the mask? Now it's normal. I think it might get back to that because dudes realize they could just wear a mask and get away with stuff. That's real. All right. So we talked about what was Hawaii's crime, what we were dealing with in Hawaii as far as crime. We talked about who it affects, who can change it. We talked about what's causing it. So let's talk about how we can take back the streets. What do we do? How can we reduce the crime, the violent crime? Here's a revolutionary idea, and it's number 1. How about we start enforcing the existing laws that are aimed at criminals who carry and use firearms to commit their crimes or commit violent crimes? Why don't we just start enforcing the laws that exist? We already know that homicides trend down when community leaders encourage solid police work and harsh penalties for gun crimes. We saw it work in Chicago when the city gave additional resources to their police departments. We've known for decades that crime control works. There was that program called Project Exile. It launched in Richmond, Virginia in 1997. Homicides were through the roof, so the prosecutor started enforcing the already existing gun laws to the fullest, imposing lengthy sentences against drug dealers and other criminals who were carrying firearms illegally. And it was a huge success. Cops took hundreds of illegal guns off the street, and Richmond's homicide plummeted. Their rate plummeted. And that's just one of many. There was one in Boston, one in New York. Number 2, stop the flow of ice, crystal meth. by plane, by boat, by mail. We got to search all the containers coming in to the islands. Too many people making money because they're not searching those containers. Too many people are getting kickbacks from the container lobby, what you would call it, from the shipping lobby. So it would be great for business. There'd be a little bump. But, is it important enough? At least better searching. Number 3, we talked about were the fathers. Fathers just got to be fathers. Give the power back to the parent. If you have a father encouraged by his community of people, they can be the most potent crime preventer. Dads are scary. I dropped kids off who just committed crimes, took them to their house, and they were like, "Officer, take me to jail. I don't want to go home. I don't want to be here. I'm going to get licking as soon as I get in the house. Just take me to jail." I was like, "I can't. You're a juvenile. Your dad's here. I got to send you home." And the dad's like, "I'm waiting for him." Number 4, show up at the polls. Vote for people who are tough on crime, strong in their support for law enforcement. Write to the police chief. Ask them to implement programs that support their officers, like mental health programs or fitness programs, counseling programs. Hire more cops and support them. I'm actually worried that HPD is going to soften its standards right now because they're in such a hire issue with new hires. I hope they don't. They were already starting to when I was leaving HPD. But stop diverting funds from the police department to social programs. Start putting them into training officers. Better trained, healthier, more active officers are going to do more for your community 100% of the time. Spend actual money and get them good training and then pay them better, but require more of them. Cops want more to be required of them, not noise complaints and, how to be a counselor. They want to do more to fight crime, but they're sick of their arrests not doing anything. They're sick of being unhealthy because they don't have the schedule's crazy. You never can really sit down and eat. So it's like on the run. They're eating a lot of fast food. I think there should be like an intense, like proactive, preemptive mental health counseling for all officers involved in any traumatic incident at work. Shootings, death of children. And I think that officers should eat better, stay in shape. If they have programs for officers to eat better, stay in shape, I'm a huge fan of first hour workout for everybody. Now we have a 12-hour shift pilot. So you have to take a lunch, like a set aside lunch where you call off the radio and say, I'm going to my lunch. That's not the case on patrol when you're on the 5-9. But this one, you could probably make it work where they could take their lunch and work out. I think that'd be great. You always feel better when you work out. You always got less to prove. You always get rid of that chip off your shoulder. And those cops do what they do for you. Encourage them to be better. Encourage them to keep their head up. Challenge them to do more, to be better. When you do that to somebody, you make them feel like they're part of the community. Number 6, educate tourists and locals about crime. I know that you think talking about crime is bad for tourism, but I'll tell you what's worse for tourism is when they get their car broken into and all their things taken. Dudes will watch, they will park by the airport. They will watch for people to leave the rental car facility with that dumb rental car, that dumb white Charger V6 with no spoiler, or that Jeep, and it has that little barcode scan on the back. They will follow them right to their apartment, their hotel, or right to the Alawai, or wherever they're going to park first to go see the water before they go to the hotel or whatever. They will follow them right there. Watch them get up, run off to the Pali lookout, bang the car, take everything, and leave. By the time they get back to the hotel, all their stuff's gone. That's worse than just telling them what's going to happen. They're going to see it either way. Be proactive. Get out ahead of it. I think we got to treat crime as a public health concern. The same way you would about cigarettes or drugs. Crime is a public health concern in Hawaii. We should have campaigns. We should be using technology. We got to try to reach every kid in these communities. It'll take 10 years. But when they get older, we'll see the impact. We got to develop these tools so that people in the community feel cared for, like they matter. There's this intervention program that was implemented at a place called Crime Lab Chicago. It's a behavioral intervention program. It targeted youth who are at risk of getting into violent encounters, probably because of the neighborhoods they live in, or what school they went to. The program used once a week interventions based on certain cognitive behavioral principles, but there was an algorithm that they followed to teach youth how to react to encounters that turn violent. This is crucial. This is behavioral cognitive therapy. Is it cognitive behavioral therapy or behavioral cognitive therapy? I think it's behavioral cognitive therapy, where you put someone in a situation, you train them how to respond or react in that situation. You do it enough that becomes something that they go to. It's like a healthy coping. It's like a healthy reaction to things. And it worked in Chicago when they implemented it. They did randomized controlled studies, and it dropped violent crime arrests by 30 to 50% during the trial. And the problem is many of these kids in the schools, I'm talking normal schools, Central, McKinley, Kalani, normal kids, they haven't learned the right behaviors over time. And they learn to react to violence pretty quickly. There's a dude named Harold Pollack. He was a co-director of the crime lab that I was just talking about. He gave a great example. All right, he says, all right, so I'm walking down the hallway at school. Somebody steps on my foot. Now, if it's me, Doug Korenic, if I'm walking down the hallway, University of Hawaii, and someone steps on my foot in the hallway, first thing goes through my head, I'm like, oh, that's probably just another student, right? He's looking at his iPhone. He's freaking looking down at his homework. I wasn't paying attention. No big deal. I just ignore it and I walk on. But if I'm a 17-year-old kid at Waianae High School, I can't afford to have people punk me at school. It's like a jungle when I go to school. Like, I can hear the music. Can you imagine when stuff's getting weird? You know what it's like. You know in your high school when something went off, when a group of a couple different people weren't getting along, and it was like there was tension in the air in the hallways. It's like electric. You knew something was going to pop off. Sometimes I remember feeling like, frick, it's about to pop off here in the school. Some dude steps on your foot or whatever. You can't get punked. There's a lot to it. So if I'm walking down the hallway, Waianae High School, I can't have somebody punk me like that. I got to get home. I got a nice shirt on, and I got a nice jacket on. My mom told me if somebody comes and takes my jacket, she can't get me another one. So when somebody does something like that, I might respond in a way to that. I might respond in a way, as a 17-year-old kid at Waianae High School, that's going to seem excessive to a teacher, to a middle-aged white teacher. But the life of that kid, that 17-year-old kid, there's incentive to him reacting harshly. People got to know that they can't walk on him. He knows what it's like to have that kid that always gets punked. Everybody thinks is soft. He don't want to be that kid. There's an incentive there. He's not making that up. There's like a real importance for why he's got to protect his honor. In his own little 17-year-old head, that's important. And it doesn't mean the kid's evil or bad or whatever. Like, he's rationalized the incentive in his head for doing what he did. And in tough environments, it's important to fight. It's so easy for people to say, there's too much fighting. Why are you fighting? That's stupid. But in that environment, fighting can be important. And that we're not going to be able to change that with the kids. Fighting may always be important. But we're going to be able to tell them, listen, fighting is your last resort. It can be your last resort. Don't go to there right away. You got other things in your toolkit that you can go to first. Many of the situations that a kid might escalate to violence, he's got other options, and he just don't know them because he's just been trained that way because he went to this school for how long? That's how it works. You want to survive, that's how you are. Kids got to know that the long-term benefits of avoiding a fight are greater than you reacting with violence. It can cause a lot of trouble, and you could get hurt. All right, so number 7, I think there needs to be better Micronesian assimilation and education programs. We need community leaders from the Micronesian community to meet with law enforcement or local communities to like game plan and strategize to bridge the gap with the cultures. It's not always understood. There's a lot of cops that don't understand the different groups of Micronesian cultures. And a lot of these youth don't have fathers in the home. That goes back to the first thing we talked about. That's why this is so complicated. And if they do, they're still left to fend for themselves on the street during the day. They come home at night or whatever. I think currently this is like the main issue with rising crime in town. And we got to stop punishing people for talking about it. Like, no one's trying to offend anybody. We're just talking about these things. But if we don't talk about them, we're not going to overcome them. We all want to overcome them. You all care. The burden that was placed on the state of Hawaii by the federal government regarding the Micronesian travel agreements, because we screwed them. We bombed their islands. But that agreement is lopsided and unsustainable. It's got to be revisited. Hawaii is being torn apart because it's just an open door policy, but we don't have any long-term plans. We don't have any long-term training programs. We got to bridge the gap with the Micronesian community. They can be really beneficial and helpful in helping police their own communities, because they understand the people. And there's an incredible community of Marshallese in Hawaii Kai. Some of my favorite people. Chinta. Good friend named Chinta. I'm going to reach out to him. We talked about it once we sat down and had a long talk about it. All right, number 8, reduce the odds that you will be a victim. Get security cameras. 33% of all homeowners in Hawaii already have security cameras. which is 50% higher than the mainland. Only 15% in the mainland have cameras. Learn martial arts. Start some physical activity. Start that health journey that you wanted to start. It's your responsibility. And then know the HPD can't always protect you. You're going to have to live in this world on your own sometimes. It might take 15 minutes for a cop to come help you out. Be there for your friends, for your community. Stand up for them. Hawaii's future depends on the individual and the community, which is made up of individuals. As far as police work goes, I think we need to focus on hotspots. I know that concept kind of came under criticism the last few years, but hotspots are huge. With the advent of the BLM movement, all the protests with the racial profiling and racial disparity of arrests. But police can obviously play a huge role in reducing crime. And they need to utilize hotspot policing. That's data-driven. We have evidence-backed research that we need to focus on hotspots. And we have hotspots, especially in Oahu. Everybody knows what they are. It's no surprise. Increase police presence in those hotspots. Get partnership from between the police and the residents, the families, the parents, the shop owners, the building managers, the school officials. The research shows that when you build partnerships between the police and the shop owners and the residents, that not only does it reduce crime, but it does so without displacing that crime into a different area. We're not talking community outreach. That's a different topic. We're talking about having a responsibility to each other, a covenant between police and the community and police and the shop owners, police and the landlords. And we don't want to just push that crime into a different area. Sometimes that's the easy way to get him to move the crime on. Sometimes District 1 is struggling with robbery, so they really crack down on a certain area and it just goes into D5, into Kalihi. But we got to think long-term solutions. All right, number 10, alcohol education for youth and parents. Alcohol is completely linked to violence. Unequivocally, the evidence is in. Alcohol is a factor in 40% of all violent crimes. 40%, almost half. We know that there's a strong relationship between alcohol and gun assaults. And that's why carrying a gun while you're drunk is illegal in all states. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying that Hawaii should ban alcohol. We know prohibition in the 1920s was a disaster. But I'm saying that there are things that we could do. Education being one of them. But there's other states that have tried things like higher alcohol taxes to put that money towards reducing violent crime. But another program that I heard about was revoking alcohol offenders' rights to drink. So South Dakota did it. It was a 24/7 sobriety program. It revoked people's right to drink if the court deemed it necessary after an alcohol-related offense. So if they did something, they committed a violent crime and alcohol was involved, they were put on a 24/7 sobriety program. It monitored the offenders through twice-a-day breathalyzer tests or a bracelet that tracked blood alcohol level and jailed them for 1 or 2 days for each failed test. Number 11, focus deterrence. We talked about this earlier. That's what community policing really means. Community policing and community outreach are two different things. When you hear a cop say community policing, he means focused deterrence. That aims at specific problems in a community like drug dealing, violent behavior, like maybe you're having a string of robberies, gangs, gun violence. And then you find the people that are doing those crimes, committing those robberies or those gun crimes, and you focus on those individuals, especially with criminal records or gang affiliation. This brings the cops together with the community to tell the criminals that there are severe consequences to you committing crimes in our neighborhood. You make those crimes harsher punishments in those areas by those people. Once you get a hold of them, you got to give them alternatives to violent crime, or they're just going to keep going back to it. There should be social services, charities, programs in the community. And Hawaii is the worst in the country. If someone has a long history of drug or even violent crimes, police could let him know about the legal consequences of violence. The community could voice through personal interactions like community town halls how it would directly damage his family, friends, church, school. And then we got to give access to jobs, vocational training, education. The community's voice needs to be heard. The community needs to stand up as a whole and set clear standards. That'll be the best way we can take things back. That's the longest lasting, strongest voice to be heard. There shouldn't be a single basketball court empty all summer in Honolulu. Picture every park, every basketball court, they should be loaded with programs so kids have something to do instead of running around Chinatown acting up, which is what they normally do in Chinatown. Every park should have options, games, competitions. This can also mean like retraining cops for certain things, getting them more involved, hiring more officers to carry it out effectively. And this can be expensive. I think it should be offered as overtime opportunities for the police officers so that you're not taking their resources and time on the beat where they're working and fighting crime and trying to make them reach out to the community at the same time. Especially, what do you have a first watch, night watch officer in Chinatown? But if there were overtime opportunities for him to come in and connect with the community, I'm down for that. You'd find the cops that want to and that are really good at it. I know this stuff costs a lot of money, but if community leaders and these lawmakers really are serious about it, they got to put their money where their mouth is. And then finally, number 12, the last thing I think we can do. This is based off the broken window theory. Anybody who is a police officer or knows a police officer, they probably heard this before. It's been talked about ad nauseum. It's called the broken window theory. The broken window theory says a few things. The baseline is this: the better you improve the quality of the neighborhood, you will reduce petty crime, social behavior problems, and major crime. Under the broken window theory, clean environment, an environment that's maintained, sends the signal to the area that it is monitored and that criminal behavior is not tolerated. You take a neighborhood that's not maintained with broken windows, graffiti, litter. You all know the neighborhoods I'm talking about. That sends a signal to the people who come through there that we don't monitor this and that you can do whatever you want and face no repercussions. The broken window theory basically says that the environment speaks to the people that visit it. It tells you one thing or the other. We either care about crime or we don't. It tells the criminal that we're not willing to stop you or to say anything. It ain't about the actual window that was broken. The broken window theory is that if a window breaks, the faster you can fix that window, the better for your community. Because the longer you let that window sit, another window will be broken. And another window will be broken. If you fix those windows that are broken, remove that graffiti, fix up the yards, pick up the litter, that says something to the people who visit that community. It tells you that we're not vulnerable. We're not defenseless. We actually care, and we're a team. Neighborhoods with a strong sense of community fix broken windows and feel personal responsibility or ownership over their areas. It starts not only to affect the criminals or the people that are passing through of what your community is worth, it actually speaks to you as the community member. It changes how you feel too. You know what it's like to mow your lawn or clean up the house or do whatever, and all of a sudden you feel good. You're like, oh, everything's nice in here. I'm gonna try to keep it better. If someone walks in your house and the house is clean, they're like, oh, he takes care of his house. I better not walk with my dirty shoes on the carpet. But we've all been to that one dude's house, our one friend's house, where the house is just filthy. The floor is as dirty inside as it is outside. You're not taking your shoe off. You're gonna put a house slipper on or house shoe on. If you let those windows go unfixed, the lawn not get cut, the graffiti left up, then the residents of that community, they start to feel differently about their neighborhood too. And when someone doesn't feel right about their neighborhood, it modifies the way they feel in public. And then they feel like they don't have control over the community. And that's when the fatherless troublemakers that we were talking about, that's when the prostitutes, the panhandlers, the drug addicts, that's when they move into the neighborhood. And that scares people who live in that neighborhood because they're afraid that things are going to get worse. So guess what? They don't go out in the streets as much. They spend less time in the streets because they don't want to look at the chronics. But when you spend less time in the streets, you feel less connected with your neighbors. We all feel less connected with our neighbors than when we were kids because there was more of a sense of community then. This is that same concept. If you don't feel comfortable going outside because the chronics moved in and you're like scared, you don't go out as much. If you don't go out as much, you don't run into neighbors. You don't feel like you're part of a community. So your neighbors become strangers. But a community that has its own standards communicates a strong message to criminals that my neighborhood does not tolerate criminal behavior. This will scare those criminals, the prostitutes, or the drug dealers, or the thieves, or the gangs. They'll go somewhere else. And maybe, just maybe, dare I say, they might develop some pride, some personal responsibility, and make those people actually want to become a part of a community. Hawaii can do this. It's just a small spike. People are making a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be on the media. Crime is still down from 2019. This spike is pretty resounding. It's hard to ignore this. But as a whole, if any state in the country has got a chance, it's Hawaii. I love Hawaii. I know you guys love Hawaii. We got to say something. When something's going down, you got to let people know. Let the community know that you're down to make things better. Support the police. Focus patrols. Mental health, counseling and support. Treatment for people that are mentally unwell. Addiction help. There's a lot of facets to this. It doesn't come down to gun control, which is all I'm seeing in the news clippings. All I'm seeing in the videos on YouTube is that we're talking about guns. There's so much more to this. Guns aren't even on the horizon. I'm going to be doing a video soon about the shooting, the Uvalde, Texas shooting, and how it relates to Hawaii, how Hawaii can prepare, and what Hawaii can do, what the threats are in Hawaii. We've had some threats, and HPD does train, and so I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming video about mass shootings in schools in Hawaii and what will happen, because it's only a matter of time before somebody will try. So I want to do a video about that so we can talk about it. A lot of people have been asking about that one, so I'll do something for that. Easy 808. I'm doing my part to keep my neighborhood better and safer. Good for you, man. Need good role models for kids too. You're right. Game Freak. Mental health. What's up, Minority Reporter? What's up, Vlo? Sharky Rich. Thanks for coming out. Fresh Hawaiian. How's it, Butter Dougie? Aloha from the 9th Island. Oh. Win something from me. You live out there or are you on vacation? Never done meth. See people on it. Yeah. Don't do it. No way. Born and raised Chicago. Spent 4 years in Pontiac. Wow. Thanks, Lay. Thanks for coming out. What's up, Tweak Mode 808? Yeah, fireworks. Have we talked about fireworks? That might be a video. Prices getting crazy. Google prices in states that have allowed 30 to 40 for 12 shells versus the 150 on the list. Wow. Axiom. Thanks for coming out. Kraken 808. What's up? Stone Wallace. Yeah, there's a movie about Hawaiians in the mainland in prison. I forget what it's called. Nons. People got to learn to love each other. Stop hating and fighting. Takes up too much energy. Preach that. Felons are dumb. Jovan says, yo, Doug, why aren't they pushing some kind of armed top flight security, heavily armed and well equipped to help out with the police? You know, the police chief has not granted a license to carry for anyone but a police officer or an armored guard for like a bank. I don't even know, in 40 or 50 years or something. So, yeah, at a certain point, they want to just keep guns to law enforcement in Hawaii. But I agree. I'm down with armed top flight security, especially in the area like private security, armed private security. We know it works, and you have competition, so you get the best guys. Easy 808 says exactly not enough PD. The Puna district, bigger than the island of Oahu, has 6 officers on duty at any given time. Crazy. So crazy. In Puna. Cali Connect said people that use drugs do so majority of the time due to past traumas. We've all got to do better and help each other and love each other instead of being so divided. I agree. That's a good comment. Man, good stuff in the chat. I appreciate you guys for jumping in there and contributing. Thanks for telling me what you thought. What's up, Aubrey? Thanks for coming out. I appreciate you. I'll see you on Monday night at our chapter 7 of the mailbox conspiracy, the Kill mailbox conspiracy. 25 actual. It takes a village to raise a child. That's it right there. We're going to close on that note. 2 hours for this one, guys. Thank you for hanging out. Thanks for giving me your time. I appreciate you guys. You guys are the best. Stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to try to get another one out this week if I can. What's up, Lyndon from Maui? Thanks, Maui. Thanks for coming out. I got Maui, Big Island, Oahu. Got Kauai. You guys came out represented today. Vegas. Cool. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Be safe out there. Until the next time. Aloha. Shoots, guys. Thanks, Derek. Bye, Nans. Bye, Le. Aloha.